On the coldest, wettest night, a mother trades her grown daughter to a silent man with a cane, payment for a debt she refuses to face. The vows are quick, the gates slam shut, and the new husband whispers one promise: "I'm gentle to you, deadly to everyone else." But this disabled stranger moves like a weapon, runs the city from the shadows, and keeps her close for one reason: she's now the softest target in his hardest war. Then the first secret drops. That infertile label? It smells like a lie. The second twist cuts deeper. The mother didn't just sell her, she sold her as bait. As enemies close in and the bedroom becomes the safest room in the world, one choice could set the city on fire. Can a woman sold like property become the one person this mafia boss can't control? Or is this marriage the spark that destroys them both? The heavy door slammed behind Raina with a sound like thunder, making her flinch. Rain pelted her shoulders as she followed Calder into the wet darkness, his cane tapping a steady rhythm against the cracked pavement. Two black sedans waited at the curb, their engines purring, wipers sweeping away sheets of water. Her mother's face was already fading behind tinted glass in the second car. No goodbye, no explanation beyond the cold facts of debt and duty. Just another Thursday night where Evelyn Holt solved her problems by sacrificing her children. Calder's gloved hand settled at Raina's elbow, steadying her as her heel caught in a sidewalk crack. His touch was impersonal, but careful, like handling fine crystal. "Watch your step," he murmured, voice barely audible above the rain. The car door opened, releasing a wave of leather-scented warmth. Raina slid inside, her damp dress clinging uncomfortably. Her fingers trembled as she smoothed the fabric over her knees, mind racing through the last 30 minutes that had upended her life. The back room had smelled of stale cigars and expensive whiskey. Her mother had practically dragged her inside, where Calder waited like a statue in a charcoal suit, his cane propped against the mahogany desk. His face gave nothing away as Evelyn launched into her rehearsed speech about unfortunate circumstances and reasonable solutions. Now sitting beside him in the hushed car, Raina studied his profile in the passing streetlights. He was younger than she'd expected for someone who commanded such power, maybe mid-30s. A thin scar traced his jaw, disappearing beneath his collar. His hands were elegant on the silver head of his cane, but she noticed the slight tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself as if compensating for an old injury. "The officiant will meet us at midnight," he said, breaking the silence. "The ceremony will be brief." Raina's throat tightened. "And my brother?" "Already handled. My men are watching your apartment building. He'll be protected, as agreed." She nodded, grateful that Thea was working late at the library tonight. He didn't need to witness this. "Does he need to know about this arrangement?" "That's your choice." Calder's gaze met hers briefly. Those secrets have a way of surfacing at inconvenient moments. Rain streaked the windows, transforming the city lights into watercolor smears. They were heading up into the hills now, where old money built fortress-like estates with ocean views. Raina pressed her fingers against the cool glass, watching her breath fog the surface. "Why me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Calder was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Your mother approached my organization 6 months ago," he finally said. "She needed certain financial problems resolved. She offered information about her workplace, a private medical facility with valuable records, and she mentioned her daughter." The pieces clicked into place. The sudden questions about her job at the museum, her schedule, her social life, the casual mentions of successful men looking to settle down. Her mother had been setting this up for months, dangling her like bait. "The debt collectors," Raina said carefully, "they work for you?" "They did. Now they'll back off completely. Your mother's slate is clean." The car wound higher into the hills. Through the rain, Raina caught glimpses of security gates and camera-topped walls. Her new life waited somewhere behind them, a gilded cage, but one that would keep Theo safe. That was all that mattered. The dashboard clock clicked to 11:58 p.m., 2 minutes until midnight. 2 minutes until she became Mrs. Viscari, bound to a stranger who bought her with the stroke of a pen. Raina closed her eyes, focusing on her breathing. She could do this. She would do this. Beside her, Calder shifted slightly. The movement drew her attention to his leg, the one he seemed to favor. The cane wasn't just an affectation, she realized. There was a story there, like the scar on his jaw and the careful way he watched the world through hooded eyes. "Almost there," he said, as massive gates swung open before them. Security lights illuminated a sweeping driveway that curved toward a modernist mansion of glass and stone. A silver-haired man in a dark suit waited under the portico. The efficient, Raina assumed. The car rolled to a stop. Before the driver could move, Calder opened his own door and stepped out into the rain. He circled to Raina's side, opened her door, and offered his hand. The gesture was oddly formal, almost courtly. His gloved fingers were warm against her cold ones as she emerged into the rain-washed night. Above them, the house loomed like a mountain of shadow and light. Somewhere inside, papers waited to be signed, vows waited to be spoken. A new life waited to begin. The clock on the dashboard blinked to 11:59 p.m. as thunder rolled across the sky. 1 minute left of being Raina Holt, daughter and sister. 1 minute before she became something else entirely. The efficient's pen scratched across, the marriage license, the sound unnaturally loud in the mansion's marble-floored study. Raina watched the ink flow, forming her new name in elegant loops. Raina Viscari. The paper made it real in a way the hurried ceremony hadn't. "Initial here as well, Mrs. Viscari," the efficient said, tapping a final line. Mrs. Viscari. The title felt foreign, like clothes that didn't quite fit. Raina signed, her usually steady hand trembling slightly. Beside her, Calder's presence was a wall of quiet intensity as he added his own signature. "The rings," he said softly. A man materialized from the shadows, one of the guards who had greeted them with respectful nods and murmured, "Signore." He presented a leather box containing 2 platinum bands. Calder lifted the smaller one, his movements precise despite the late hour. "With this ring," he said in that low, measured voice, "I vow to be tender to you." The metal slid cool against her finger. His eyes held hers, dark and unblinking. "And lethal to anyone who threatens you." The words sent a shiver down her spine, not entirely from fear. There was something compelling about his quiet intensity, the absolute certainty in his tone. When she slipped the matching ring onto his finger, her hand steadied. The officiant gathered his papers and departed with efficient grace. Guards flanked the doorway as a woman in a tailored suit appeared. "This is Marina," Calder said. "She'll show you to your room." "My mother," Raina started, "will not contact you again." His tone left no room for argument. "As for Theo, he'll be moved to a secure apartment before morning. The lease is paid for a year, with an option to extend." Raina swallowed hard. "Can I at least call him?" "Tomorrow." Calder's expression softened fractionally. "Let him sleep tonight. Marina will bring you a phone in the morning." Marina led her through the mansion's shadowed halls. Raina's museum-trained eye caught glimpses of original artwork, antique furnishings that probably cost more than her annual salary. Security cameras tracked their progress at regular intervals. The guest room was larger than her entire apartment. Cream-colored walls, a king-size bed draped in silk, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. A balcony stretched beyond the glass doors with subtle but sturdy bolts. "For your safety, Mrs. Viscari," Marina said, noting her gaze. "The grounds are monitored, but we take no chances at night." The attached bathroom gleamed with marble and chrome. Fresh toiletries lined the counter, and a silk nightgown hung behind the door. Everything planned, everything provided. The efficiency was both impressive and unsettling. "There's a guard station at the end of the hall," Marina continued. "Someone will always be available if you need anything. Breakfast is served at 8, but I can have something sent up earlier." Raina nodded, already mapping the space in her mind. 2 doors, bathroom and hall, 3 windows, all with ocean views. The balcony wrapped around the corner of the house, security cameras positioned to cover every approach. Marina departed with a quiet, "Good night," leaving Raina alone with her thoughts and the sound of waves crashing below. She changed into the nightgown, its fabric whispering against her skin, then paced the room's perimeter. The carpet muffled her footsteps, but she could hear others. Regular patrols passing in the hall, the distant murmur of voices through an intercom, the subtle hum of the security system. Everything ran with military precision, even at this hour. She tested the balcony door. The bolt was serious hardware, probably connected to an alarm. The windows were the same, secure without being obvious about it. Protection or containment? Maybe both. A patrol vehicle rumbled down the curved driveway, its headlights sweeping across the room before disappearing into the night. Raina pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching her reflection fragment in the darkness. The bed, when she finally lay down, was sinfully comfortable. The sheets smelled of lavender, and ocean waves provided a constant rhythm beneath the quiet whir of climate control. Such careful attention to comfort, yet she couldn't relax. Her finger traced the unfamiliar weight of the wedding ring. Somewhere in this fortress of a house, Calder was probably still awake, running his empire with that same precise control he showed in everything else. What kind of man was he, really? The sort who threatened with a whisper instead of a shout, who killed with paperwork instead of bullets. The clock on the bedside table clicked to 1:20 a.m. In a few hours, the sun would rise over the ocean, painting everything in new light. She would test every boundary then, map every corridor, and rule. She would learn the rhythms of this place, its weaknesses and pressure points. For now, she listened to the waves and the distant rumble of another patrol, cataloging details like the treasure inventories she managed at work, the camera angles, the guard rotations, the way sound carried through the ventilation system. Knowledge was power, and she needed every advantage she could get. Theo would be safe by morning. That was the important thing. Whatever game her mother had played, whatever web she'd woven, at least her brother would be protected. Raina could handle everything else. She had to. Another set of footsteps passed her door, measured and unhurried. The ocean breathed against the cliffs below. Inside this gilded cage, Raina lay awake, holding on to her determination like a shield. Morning would come soon enough, and with it, the chance to start testing the bars of her new life. Gray dawn crept through the windows when 3 precise knocks broke the silence. Raina sat up, wrapping the silk robe tighter around herself. Yes? May I come in? Calder's voice was measured, calm. One moment. She smoothed her hair, checking her reflection before opening the door. He stood there balancing a silver breakfast tray, despite his cane, steam rising from a porcelain coffee pot. The morning light caught the angles of his face, highlighting a thin scar that traced his jaw. His suit was impeccable, charcoal gray, perfectly pressed. I thought you might prefer breakfast here this morning. He moved into the room with that controlled grace she'd noticed before, setting the tray on a small table by the windows. Poached eggs, toast, fresh fruit. Raina watched him pour coffee into delicate cups. His movements were precise, deliberate. Nothing wasted, nothing rushed. Thank you. He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a key card and a smartphone. The card accesses your suite and common areas. The phone has one contact, me. I expect you to keep it with you. She turned the phone over in her hands. New model, probably secured. Just your number? For now. He settled into an armchair, resting his cane against the side. There are 3 rules, Raina. First, don't leave the grounds without me. Second, no contact with press or anyone you can't personally vouch for. Third, tell me immediately if anyone from your past reaches out. The eggs were perfectly poached, the coffee rich and dark. She ate slowly, processing his words. What about my work at the museum? You'll need to resign. I'll have compensation arranged. His tone left no room for argument. Your safety is my priority now. After breakfast, she explored. The mansion sprawled across the clifftop, a maze of corridors and rooms. The library drew her first, walls of leather-bound books, deep leather chairs, a chess set carved from jade. Her keycard worked smoothly here. The winter garden came next, a cathedral of glass and steel filled with orchids and climbing vines. Humidity wrapped around her like a blanket. Through the glass, she could see armed men patrolling the grounds, their movements as precise as their employers. In the kitchen, she met Isabel, a chef with steady hands and calm eyes. Anything you'd like, Mrs. Viscari. Anytime. The woman moved through her domain with quiet authority, directing staff and checking deliveries. Raina tested doors as she walked, noting which ones opened to her card and which remained locked. The exterior gates, she discovered, required additional security codes. She was free to roam inside, but the boundaries were clear. By late morning, she found herself in a glass-walled corridor overlooking the sea. The view was breathtaking, waves crashing against rocks far below, seabirds wheeling in the salt air. She pressed her hand against the cool glass, watching clouds scud across the sky. The crack came without warning, sharp, decisive. The glass spiderwebbed inches from her face. Down! Calder's voice cut through her shock. His cane swept her legs, taking her to the floor as another shot rang out. He moved with shocking speed, the disability vanishing as he spun toward the sound. Men materialized from nowhere. Calder's security, she realized. They moved like shadows, weapons drawn. Through the fractured glass, she saw them converge on a figure in the garden. The takedown was brutal and efficient. Raina's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Calder knelt beside her, checking for injuries. His touch was gentle, but his eyes were arctic cold as he watched his men secure the shooter. Are you hurt? His voice was low, controlled. but she heard the fury underneath. She shook her head, unable to look away from the scene outside. The man who'd seemed so limited by his cane had moved like a predator. Every gesture had been lethal, precise. This was the real Calder Vescari, not disabled, but dangerous. A team of glaziers arrived within minutes, their truck crunching up the drive. Calder spoke rapidly into his phone, ordering full perimeter sweeps, camera reviews, background checks. His free hand never left Raina's shoulder. "We'll talk after lunch," he promised, helping her stand. "Everything will be explained." The clock on the wall read 11:45 a.m., less than 24 hours into her new life, and already the illusions were shattering like the glass around them. She watched the glaziers begin their work, their movements careful around the impact point. The shooter was gone, but she could still see the dark stains on the gravel where they'd taken him down. Calder's men moved with renewed vigilance, their patterns tighter, their attention razor-sharp. The incident had lasted perhaps 30 seconds, but it had revealed so much. Her husband wasn't just wealthy or powerful, he was dangerous. The cane wasn't a weakness, it was camouflage. She thought of his careful movements at breakfast, the controlled precision that she now recognized as something else entirely. Not limitation, but coiled readiness. Security swarmed the grounds, checking every shadow and angle. Inside, staff moved with practiced efficiency, cleaning broken glass and rerouting foot traffic. No one seemed surprised by the violence, only disappointed that their defenses had been breached. Raina watched it all, her pulse finally steadying. The trembling in her hands began to fade, replaced by a strange clarity. This was her world now. Beauty and danger, luxury and violence. Her husband was both gentleman and weapon, and she had so much yet to learn. At 1 o'clock, the estate hummed with activity. Workers replaced the shattered glass while security teams swept the grounds with military precision. Raina followed Calder down a corridor she hadn't explored, her keycard granting access to what appeared to be the heart of his operation. The security hub sprawled across what must have been a converted basement. Screens lined the walls, showing every angle of the estate and its surroundings. Men and women in tactical gear monitored feeds, spoke into headsets, and tracked data across multiple displays. "I won't insult you with half-truths," Calder said, leaning on his cane as he gestured to the main screen. "The shooter wasn't random. A rival group has been marking my shipments for weeks." Raina studied the footage of the morning's incident. "And last night's arrangement with my mother? Likely put you in their sights?" His voice remained steady, but his grip tightened on the cane. "They'll see you as leverage." He walked her through the security measures, motion sensors, infrared cameras, armed patrols. Then, carefully, he began explaining his real business. The harbor routes he controlled, the neighborhoods under his protection, the delicate balance of power maintained through calculated shows of force. "Fear is currency," he said, watching her reaction. "But so is mercy. I choose carefully when to use each." Raina absorbed this, noting how the security team treated him, not with fear, but with absolute loyalty. "I need to call Theo," she said finally. "I need to hear his voice." Calder nodded. 3 o'clock, my team will secure the line. The hours until the call crawled by. Raina paced the winter garden, watching repair crews work. At precisely 3, Calder led her back to the security hub. The call connected immediately. "Rye?" Theo's voice was clear, calm. "I'm okay. The apartment is nice, lots of natural light." "Are you safe?" She pressed her palm against the cool desk. "Yeah, new locks, stocked kitchen, better than the old place." A pause. "Your husband's people are thorough." "I'll visit soon," she promised, feeling Calder's quiet presence behind her. "I know you will." Theo's voice softened. "Get some rest, sis." The call ended too quickly, but hearing him helped. Throughout the afternoon, Raina watched Calder work. He moved between screens and reports, giving orders in that measured voice. The cane never seemed to slow him, and now she understood why. It was part of his carefully crafted image, hiding the predator beneath. At 7, Isabel served dinner in a room overlooking the ocean. Roasted sea bass, perfectly seasoned vegetables, wine she barely touched. The formal dining room remained empty. Instead, they sat at a smaller table meant for intimate conversations. "What foods bring you comfort?" Calder asked suddenly, breaking a comfortable silence. The question startled her. "What?" "Everyone has comfort foods? Dishes that feel like safety?" He set down his fork. "I'd like to know yours." It was such an unexpectedly gentle inquiry. "My grandmother's risotto," she admitted, "with mushrooms and thyme, and dark chocolate with sea salt." He nodded, as if memorizing this information. They talked quietly through the meal, about books they'd read, places they'd traveled, careful topics that built bridges between their worlds. He never pushed, never demanded, just listened with genuine interest. The walk to her room felt different than the previous night. The air seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. At her door, Calder turned to face her, close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow. She felt the shift in his breathing, saw his gaze drop to her lips. The space between them crackled with tension. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. But when she inhaled sharply, surprise or anticipation, she wasn't sure. He stopped, stepped back, respected the boundary she hadn't even known she was setting. "Sleep well, Raina," he said softly and walked away. In her room, the clock showed 9:30. Raina sat at the antique desk, opening the leather journal she'd found earlier. By lamplight, she began to write, sorting through the day's revelations. The truth was unsettling. She felt safer here, behind these walls and gates, than she had anywhere else. Even knowing what Calder was, or perhaps because of it. His power wasn't hidden anymore. It was offered as protection. She wrote about the security hub, the careful way he shared information, the gentle question about comfort foods, about how he'd stopped at her sharp breath, showing more respect for her boundaries than anyone in her past. The ocean whispered beyond her windows, and somewhere, men patrolled with silent dedication. Tomorrow, she decided, writing the thought down, she would ask to see the grounds at sunrise, learn the full scope of her new sanctuary. The lamp cast a warm circle on the paper as she detailed the day's events. The morning violence, the afternoon revelations, the evening's near kiss that left her wondering why she'd startled and why part of her wished she hadn't. She wrote until her hand cramped, filling pages with observations and questions. The estate's rhythms began to make sense. The patrol patterns, the shift changes, the constant vigilance that somehow felt more reassuring than oppressive. The journal became her anchor, a place to process the swift changes in her life. She documented the way Calder moved when he thought no one was watching, the respect his people showed without fear, the careful distance he maintained unless she moved closer first. Security lights swept the grounds outside, regular as heartbeats. Inside, she could hear the faint hum of the estate's systems, climate control, surveillance, protection layered upon protection. All of it designed to keep threats out and her safe within. The dawn crept over the cliffside estate in watercolor shades of pink and gold. Raina matched her steps to Calder's measured pace as they followed the garden's winding paths. Morning dew clung to manicured hedges and carefully tended roses. She watched him move, noting how the cane complemented his stride rather than hindering it. When he reached to touch a climbing vine, his trouser leg shifted, revealing the glint of carbon fiber beneath. "The brace," she said quietly. "How long?" 3 years. He didn't flinch from her directness. "The explosion took half the warehouse, and someone I trusted. The cane helps with long days, but it's also useful for maintaining appearances. Appearances of weakness? Of being less than I am?" His smile held no warmth. "Enemies underestimate a man with a cane." They passed a burbling fountain, its white noise masking their conversation from any distance. "How many enemies?" "Enough to keep security necessary, not enough to truly threaten what's mine." He gestured to a stone bench overlooking the rose garden. "Would you like to rest? I want to understand." She remained standing. "The risks, the rivals, all of it." He studied her for a long moment. "The explosion was meant to cripple more than my leg. Someone wanted my harbor routes, my influence. They failed." His voice stayed level, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "I rebuilt. Stronger barriers, better contingencies. No one touches what I protect." The morning light softened as they completed their circuit of the gardens. Inside, Isabel had prepared a light breakfast, fresh fruit, warm pastries, coffee that filled the kitchen with its rich aroma. At 10, they arrived at the charity gala. The venue sparkled with crystal chandeliers and polished marble, security discreet but omnipresent. Raina wore a dove-gray dress that whispered wealth without ostentation. Calder's suit was impeccably tailored to conceal both brace and weapon. She felt the shift in the room when they entered. Conversations stalled, resumed, rippled outward with new awareness. The harbor master. The title followed them like a shadow. Mrs. Viscari, a silver-haired woman approached, smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Welcome to our little gathering." Raina noted the careful distance others maintained, the way drinks were tasted only after servers moved well away. She recognized fear wrapped in expensive perfume and designer labels. Calder's hand settled at the small of her back, warm through the silk of her dress. He leaned close, voice pitched for her ears alone. "They'll fear you now. It's protection, the surest kind in our world." She watched a rival family's heir blanch when Calder's gaze passed over him. "Is that what you want? For everyone to fear me?" "I want you safe." His fingers traced a gentle pattern against her spine. "Fear keeps people cautious. Cautious people make fewer mistakes." The gala proceeded with practiced elegance. Auction items displayed, speeches made, checks written. But Raina saw the undercurrents now. Alliances mapped in seating arrangements. Threats measured in handshake pressure. Power demonstrated through casual generosity. At 1:45, they moved to leave. The convoy formed smoothly. 3 identical black vehicles, windows tinted against the afternoon sun. 2 blocks from the venue, hostile cars appeared, trying to box them in. But Calder's men moved like a choreographed dance. The lead car peeled right, drawing pursuit. Their vehicle accelerated through a gap while the third car blocked any follow-up. Within minutes, they'd regrouped on a different route, the threat neutralized without a single shot fired. The estate welcomed them back at 3. Security tightened but unobtrusive. In Calder's study, Raina stood before his desk, afternoon light streaming through bulletproof glass. "I need the truth," she said. "Not partial answers or gentle warnings. What does life with you really mean?" He set aside his tablet, giving her his full attention. "It means absolute protection and limited freedom. It means wealth, power, and constant vigilance." He stood, moving around the desk. "I won't hurt you. I'll hurt everyone else." The promise hung between them, both threat and vow. Raina absorbed it, watching how he balanced against the desk, the careful way he managed his weight. They spent the remainder of the afternoon in the security hub, Calder explaining patrol patterns and response protocols. He showed her how to access emergency channels, which panic buttons connected to which teams, the layers of defense built into every inch of the estate. Dinner was served in the winter garden, glass walls reflecting the sunset's last rays. They talked about the gala's subtle politics, the meaning behind each interaction she'd observed. He praised her instincts, her quick grasp of unspoken dynamics. As night settled over the estate, Raina retired to her room. She could hear the distant sound of waves against the cliff, the quiet footsteps of the night patrol. The convoy's precise movements played through her mind, the seamless coordination, the practiced response to threat. Her world had expanded and contracted simultaneously. The estate's boundaries were her limits now, but within them lay complexities she was only beginning to grasp. Power dynamics, security protocols, the delicate balance of influence and intimidation. In bed, the clock showing 11:20, Raina drifted towards sleep. The day's lessons arranged themselves in her mind. The carbon brace, hidden by careful tailoring, the fear that followed Calder's title, the swift response to danger. This was her world now. Understanding it wasn't optional, it was survival. Sunday morning light filtered through the estate's windows as Dr. Morell arrived, his medical bag in hand. The security team performed their usual checks with practiced efficiency, though they treated him with familiar respect. He'd been Calder's physician long enough to be considered trusted. Raina observed from the winter garden as the doctor was escorted in. She'd been up since dawn, anxiety gnawing at her stomach. The household checkups provided perfect cover for what she really needed to know. "Mrs. Viscari," Dr. Morell greeted her warmly, his manner professional but kind. "Shall we begin with you?" In the converted study-turned-exam room, Raina perched on the edge of a leather chair. "I need to verify something," she said quietly. "A diagnosis from 2 years ago." The doctor's eyes showed understanding. "The infertility claim?" When she nodded, he continued, "I've reviewed your previous records. Let's run comprehensive labs to be certain." As he drew blood, Raina studied the room's details, the way Calder had cleared it of business papers, the fresh flowers someone had placed in a crystal vase, the morning sun casting gentle shadows across the floor. "Results should be ready within 36 hours, Dr. Morell assured her. "Everything will be completely confidential." She caught Calder's silhouette through the frosted glass door, his stance protective even now. The thought warmed her unexpectedly. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of routine examinations for the household staff. Near noon, Calder found her in the library. "I'd like you to move to the inner suite," he said without preamble. "After the window incident, I'd feel better having you closer to the secure core of the house." The inner suite was his personal space. She'd glimpsed it only once before. "Is that wise?" His smile held a trace of irony. Probably not, but it's safer. The move itself was simple. She had few possessions here yet, but the implications felt enormous as they arranged her things alongside his. Her dresses hung next to his suits, her perfume bottle reflected in the same mirror as his watch. They worked in companionable silence, finding space for her books, adding her preferred tea to his coffee station. When she placed her reading lamp on the nightstand, the domesticity of it all struck her suddenly. "Strange, isn't it?" Calder commented, noting her expression. "How quickly the extraordinary becomes ordinary." Late afternoon brought a security briefing. Updates on the rival syndicate's movements, patrol adjustments, contingency plans. Raina listened, absorbing details about the world that now protected her while potentially painting a target on her back. As evening approached, Calder surprised her by suggesting they cook dinner together. The kitchen staff had already left for the day, leaving the space to them. "I make excellent crepes," he claimed, rolling up his sleeves. The motion revealed a glimpse of scarring on his forearm, but he didn't seem to notice or care. Raina measured ingredients while he mixed batter, their movements falling into an unexpected rhythm. The first few crepes turned out perfectly under his guidance. Then came the flip. Calder's attempt at a dramatic pan toss ended with batter on the ceiling and both of them staring upward in stunned silence. His startled laugh caught them both off guard. Deep, genuine, transforming his entire face. Rana found herself laughing too, the sound echoing in the kitchen as batter slowly dripped down. "Excellent crepes, I may have oversold my skills slightly," he admitted, eyes still dancing with amusement. They eventually managed a decent meal, sharing it at the kitchen island rather than the formal dining room. Conversation flowed easier here, away from the weight of their public roles. Night settled over the estate. Raina found herself restless, standing at the suite's windows well after midnight. The ocean stretched dark and endless. Below, its rhythm constant. Calder's approach was silent, but she felt his presence before he spoke. "Can't sleep?" "Too many thoughts." She traced a finger along the glass. "How do you do it? Carry all this weight without breaking?" He moved closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Most times I'm calculating angles, threats, advantages, necessary sacrifices, but here," he gestured to the quiet room, the shared space they'd created. "These moments are different. Here, I just breathe." The admission hung between them, heavy with trust. They stood together, watching moonlight silver the waves, until exhaustion finally drew them to bed. They settled on opposite sides, a careful space maintained between them. No touch, no pressure, just the sound of steady breathing and distant waves. It felt like progress, this careful dance of proximity and restraint, of growing trust and mutual respect. The clock read 12:40 a.m. when sleep finally claimed them both, the ocean's rhythm a constant lullaby beneath their windows. The sheets remained undisturbed between them, an unspoken boundary they weren't ready to cross. But even this, sleeping in parallel, sharing space and silence, felt like a step forward on their unconventional path. In the darkness, their breaths fell into matching patterns, slow and deep. The night patrol made their rounds outside, footsteps nearly silent on the gravel paths. Inside, two people who'd been strangers days ago found peace in shared insomnia turned to shared rest, the weight of their new reality settling into something almost comfortable. Dr. Morell's return at precisely 9 brought a folder and a carefully neutral expression. In the estate's medical suite, she laid out pages of lab reports while Raina perched on the exam table, Calder a steady presence by the door. "I've reviewed your previous medical records," Morell began, "and something isn't adding up. The infertility diagnosis from 2 years ago, the labs don't match the patient demographics. Age markers, blood type, even basic metabolic patterns are inconsistent." Raina's fingers curled around the paper's edge. "What does that mean?" "It means someone deliberately attached incorrect lab results to your file. This wasn't a clerical error. The tampering is too precise." Morell's gaze flickered to Calder. "Someone wanted you labeled as infertile." The room went utterly still. Calder's hand tightened on his cane, knuckles white against the dark wood. When he spoke, his voice was winter cold. "You can verify this." "The digital trail is clear. Your original labs were overwritten with data from another patient entirely." Raina felt the world tilt sideways. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. "You should be grateful anyone would still want you." Years of carefully orchestrated comments about her condition, about settling, about taking whatever opportunity came along. "I'll need time to run new panels," Morell continued. "But There's no medical evidence supporting the original diagnosis. Calder moved then, crossing to Raina with measured steps. His hand found her shoulder, steady and warm. Thank you, doctor. Please send everything to my security team. After Morell left, Raina sat frozen, processing. Calder didn't rush her, simply maintained that anchoring touch until her breathing steadied. I want to know who, she finally managed. I need to know how deep this goes. He nodded once, already reaching for his phone. Within an hour, his tech chief had remote access to the clinic's systems. By early afternoon, they had a name. Dr. Marcus Voss, Administrator of Women's Services. The connection's there, Calder's tech chief reported, projecting financial records onto the library wall. Voss consulted at 3 different fertility clinics. Each time, your mother's foundation made substantial donations shortly after. Raina pressed her palms flat against the desk, fighting nausea. She made sure I'd believe I was broken, made sure I'd feel grateful when she sold me. The tremor hit then, not tears, but a bone-deep shaking she couldn't control. Calder was there instantly, arms wrapping around her, chin resting on her head. He held her until the trembling subsided, then stepped back with careful deliberation. Excuse me for a moment, he said softly, and left to make calls. She heard fragments through the door, surgical phrases about access and consequences, about making examples. His voice never rose, which somehow made it more terrifying. At 6, he found her in the winter garden, where she'd been watching the sunset paint the glass walls gold. You have options, he said without preamble. We can confront your mother now, or we can monitor her, gather more evidence of what else she might have orchestrated. The choice is yours. Raina considered the paths before her. Evidence first. I want to know everything. He nodded, accepting her decision without question. There's something else I'd like to show you. The guest annex stood separate from the main house, but within the security perimeter. Modern, comfortable, with its own kitchen and living space. For Theo, Calder explained. Next weekend, if you're comfortable, he'd have privacy but still be protected. Raina walked the space, noting the gaming setup, the well-stocked bookshelves. You planned this. I promised him safety. This delivers that promise while respecting his independence. Back in their suite that night, Raina crafted a careful text to her brother. Would you like to visit next Saturday? It's a beautiful coastal place with good security. You'd have your own space. The reply came quickly. Sure. Send details? She looked up to find Calder watching her, his expression gentle. The lamplight cast soft shadows across his face, highlighting the scars he never tried to hide from her. Whatever we find, he said quietly, whatever truth comes out, you'll survive it. And you won't face it. Alone. Raina touched her phone where Theo's message glowed. The truth, she whispered, more to herself than Calder. Whatever it costs, I'll endure it. The clock read 11 p.m. Outside, waves crashed against the cliffs in their eternal rhythm. Inside, a woman who'd been sold with a carefully crafted lie felt the first stirrings of real strength. Not from anger or vengeance, but from finally glimpsing the full scope of what she'd survived. The room was quiet save for the ocean's distant roar and the soft sound of their breathing. Raina sat at the window seat, phone still in hand, while Calder worked at his desk nearby. Neither spoke, but the silence held comfort rather than tension. They'd found a rhythm in these evening hours, separate but connected, each processing the day's revelations in their own way while taking quiet strength from the other's presence. Security lights swept the grounds in regular patterns, reflecting off the glass like distant stars. Inside, the lamp cast a warm circle around them both, a pocket of safety in a world that grew more complex by the day. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more investigations, more carefully laid plans. But for now, in this moment, there was just this, the truth beginning to unfold, and 2 people facing it together. The security hub crackled with static at 7:30 a.m., interrupting the steady rhythm of morning reports. Raina looked up from her coffee, catching the shift in atmosphere as guards straightened, hands moving to earpieces. Echo 3, position compromised. The voice was clipped, professional. Bridge point, Charlie. Calder materialized from his office, cane forgotten against the wall as he leaned over the command console. His shoulders went rigid as red dots multiplied on the tactical display. Hector's convoy, he said, voice glacier cold. They're trying to split him off. Raina watched the transformation, the controlled businessman becoming something else entirely. His fingers flew over the console, voice sharp with authority as he issued rapid-fire commands. Smoke screen, south approach, units 2 and 4, flank wide, push them toward the water, no witnesses. The next 2 hours unfolded like a brutal chess match. Reyna couldn't look away from the screens, watching black SUVs execute precise maneuvers while Calder orchestrated their dance. His tactics were beautiful in their efficiency, herding the attackers into kill zones, cutting off escape routes, protecting his people with calculated fury. When Hector's vehicle finally cleared the danger zone, Reyna released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Calder's hands remained steady on the console, but she noticed the tight line of his jaw, the way he leaned more heavily on his good leg. By 10:10 a.m., engines rumbled in the courtyard. Hector walked in under his own power, sporting a split lip and bloody knuckles. Behind him, Calder moved with careful precision, but Reyna caught the subtle flinch when he stepped wrong. She found the first aid kit without being asked, spreading supplies on the security room's conference table. As she cleaned Hector's wounds, she watched Calder sink into a chair, fingers working at the straps of his leg brace. Ice, she said quietly, and one of the guards disappeared to fetch some. The room cleared gradually, leaving them in relative privacy. Reyna finished with Hector's hands and moved to Calder, noting how the brace had left angry marks on his skin. She settled the ice pack carefully, watching his face for signs of discomfort. The explosion, he said finally, eyes fixed on some distant point. 5 years ago. The bridge was similar to today's. Narrow approach, limited visibility. Reyna's hands stilled on the gauze she was re-rolling. She'd wondered about the accident that left him with the brace, but he'd never volunteered details. Marcus was my second then, Calder continued. He saw the trap first, pushed me clear. His voice carried the weight of old guilt. The blast caught him instead, left a wife, 2 kids. I make sure they'll never want for anything, but it doesn't touch the debt. So you protect everyone else, Reyna said softly. You calculate every angle, plan for every threat. I won't lose anyone else. His eyes met hers, intense and honest. Not my people. Not you. The day settled into quieter rhythms after that. Reyna helped him resecure the brace, fingers lingering on the straps. They worked in the security hub, reviewing footage, strengthening protocols. She brought him coffee, he ordered lunch for the team. Small domestic moments woven through the aftermath of violence. By evening, the tension had shifted to something else entirely. They ate dinner in the winter garden, watching stars appear beyond the glass. At 8 by sun p.m., Reyna reached across the table to brush a crumb from his sleeve, and something electric passed between them. Calder caught her hand before she could withdraw it. His thumb traced her palm, sending shivers up her arm. When she met his gaze, the intensity there stole her breath. He moved slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she leaned in as his free hand cupped her face, and then his lips found hers. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined, and she had imagined it, in quiet moments she'd never admit to. It was deep and claiming, yet somehow still gentle. He kissed her like he had all the time in the world, like she was precious and dangerous all at once. When they finally parted for breath, his forehead rested against hers. I won't take anything you don't freely give, he murmured. I know, she whispered back, and kissed him again. They migrated to the library, where kisses alternated with quiet conversation. She learned the texture of his scars under her fingertips. He discovered the sensitive spot behind her ear that made her shiver. Everything felt unhurried, despite the heat building between them. Rain started sometime after 10, pattering against the windows. They ended up in their shared suite. Reyna curled into Calder's chest as he read reports one-handed, his other arm wrapped securely around her. The steady thrum of his heartbeat under her ear made her eyes grow heavy. At 11:45 p.m., she was nearly asleep, warm and safe in this unexpected sanctuary. Through half-closed eyes, she watched the security console across the room, its familiar lights blinking in steady patterns. All except one, a red indicator that began to pulse slowly, signaling movement at the perimeter fence. Calder's arm tightened fractionally around her, but he didn't move, didn't disturb her drift toward sleep. Whatever threat approached, he would handle it. For now, in this moment, he simply held her close while rain fell outside, and the red light blinked its silent warning. Dawn crept over the estate with a bitter chill. At 6:05 a.m., Calder's security team converged on the northeast corner where motion sensors had triggered. They found a small package, dropped by a commercial drone that had already disappeared into the gray morning sky. Reyna watched from the security hub as Calder's men followed protocol, scanning, photographing, carefully opening the package at a safe distance. Inside lay a cheap burner phone, a folded note, and a Polaroid of her mother standing next to a man Raina didn't recognize. Calder read the note first, his expression hardening. He handed it to her without comment. The handwriting was unmistakable, Evelyn's precise, slanted script. "Darling, there's been a misunderstanding. Come home and we'll sort it out." Below it, in different handwriting, "Send her out or we come in. T.R. Tomas Rinaldi," Calder said quietly. "He controls the warehouse district south of the harbor." Raina's fingers trembled on the paper. "My mother's with him? We'll trace the phone." Calder's voice was gentle, but she saw the storm gathering in his eyes. He pressed a kiss to her temple before moving to coordinate with his tech team. The morning unfolded in a blur of activity. Calder's people tracked the phone's signal to an abandoned warehouse complex. Surveillance photos showed increased activity in the area, men with guns, black SUVs coming and going. At 10 a.m., Calder's financial investigator arrived with a thick folder. Raina sat beside Calder in his office as the man laid out document after document, bank statements, wire transfers, shell company records. With each page, the betrayal grew clearer, colder. Evelyn's account showed regular payments from a company that traced back to Rinaldi. The first deposit arrived 2 years ago, the same week Dr. Voss had falsified Raina's medical records. More payments followed, increasing in frequency over the past month. "The fertility lie was strategic," Calder explained, his voice carefully controlled. "It isolated you, made you believe your options were limited. Then your mother sold you. Not to settle a debt, but as bait to get inside my organization." Raina stared at the numbers until they blurred. 2 years. For 2 years, her mother had let her believe she was broken, all while taking money from a rival crime boss. All those gentle suggestions about settling for any man who'd have her, the constant reminders of her supposed infertility. It had been manipulation, preparing her for this final betrayal. "I'll handle it," Calder said quietly. "But the choice about your mother is yours. Tell me what you want done." Raina pressed her palms flat against his desk, fighting nausea. "I want proof. All of it. Every transaction, every communication you can find." She took a shaking breath. "And I want her taken alive, if possible. I need to hear her explain why." Calder nodded once, then began issuing orders. Teams mobilized, surveillance intensified. Throughout the day, more evidence arrived. Security footage of Evelyn meeting with Rinaldi's men, phone records showing calls to Dr. Voss, a paper trail of her slow descent into betrayal. Raina moved through the hours in a daze. She reviewed documents mechanically, forcing herself to face each new revelation. Calder kept close, but gave her space to process, understanding instinctively when to touch her shoulder and when to step back. By evening, exhaustion had settled into her bones. She found herself on their balcony at 9:30 p.m., gripping the railing as she stared at the stars. The ocean crashed below, its rhythm unchanging despite how her world had shattered. Her mother had sold her, not just sold her, helped break her first, piece by piece, year by year. The fertility lie had been calculated, designed to make her desperate enough to accept any arrangement. And now Evelyn was working with Rinaldi, using her own daughter as a weapon against Calder. Behind her, she heard Calder's measured steps. He didn't approach, just stood quietly in the doorway, a solid presence at her back, letting her have this moment with her grief and fury, but staying close enough to catch her if she needed it. Raina breathed in the salt air, letting it burn her lungs. Part of her wanted to scream, to throw things, to let her rage echo across the water. Another part wanted to collapse into Calder's arms and let him shield her from all of it. Instead, she stood straight-backed under the night sky, cataloging her mother's betrayals like stars. Each lie, each manipulation, each calculated cruelty. She would face them all. She would read every document, hear every explanation, and then decide what justice looked like. The breeze carried the scent of rain. Raina closed her eyes, feeling the wind on her face. Behind her, Calder remained silent, patient, giving her this space to breathe through the pain while staying close enough to remind her she wasn't alone. Tomorrow would bring action, teams moving on the warehouse district, confrontations, possibly violence. But tonight was for processing, for letting the full weight of betrayal settle into her bones so she could face whatever came next with clear eyes. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human betrayals. Raina gripped the railing tighter, drawing strength from its solidity. She had survived her mother's manipulations for years. She would survive this too, with the truth as her armor and Calder's steady presence at her back. The Thursday morning quiet shattered at 11 sharp. Security panels flashed red across the estate as an impossible breach registered. Someone had used a valid key at the service gate. Raina's heart stopped as she watched the feed from the library security screen. 6 minutes of exposure, multiple vehicles entering with military precision. "Ma'am, we need to move!" A guard appeared at her elbow, his earpiece crackling with urgent chatter. "Panic room now!" She let him guide her through the corridors, mind racing. This was too coordinated, too clean. Someone inside had helped them breach the perimeter, probably the same person who'd given them the layout, told them where to find her. They rounded a corner and a wet thud stopped her cold. One of Calder's men crumpled, red spreading across his shirt. He wasn't dead. She could see him breathing. But the sight crystallized something in her mind. This wouldn't stop. As long as she was here, Rinaldi would keep coming. More of Calder's people would get hurt trying to protect her. The endless siege would continue until someone died. Her guard tried to hustle her forward, but Raina planted her feet. She pulled out her phone, the one with just one contact, and typed quickly, "Stop this with me!" Before anyone could stop her, she walked straight out the front door and down the driveway. She kept her hands raised where the surveillance cameras could see them clearly. Her pulse thundered in her ears, but her steps remained steady. "I'm here," she called out clearly. "No one else needs to get hurt." They emerged from the shadows like wolves, 4 men in tactical gear, moving with practiced efficiency. At 11:12 a.m., rough hands grabbed her arms. "The staff stays unharmed," she demanded, voice steel-edged, despite her racing heart. "That's my condition." A black hood descended over her eyes. They zip-tied her wrists and bundled her into a vehicle that smelled of cigarettes and gun oil. As they pulled away, she focused on counting turns, tracking time, memorizing every detail she could gather through her other senses. 20 minutes later, Calder arrived at the estate. The security feed showed him the moment she walked out, showed her surrender. For one terrible moment, he went absolutely still, a predator carved from ice and rage. Then he exploded into motion. "Lock down every dock from here to the state line," he ordered, voice deadly quiet. "I want every harbor master, dock worker, and waterfront rat on our payroll in the next hour. No one moves on those docks without my permission." His men scattered to execute his commands while he studied traffic. Patterns, shipping schedules, warehouse locations. Money flowed like water, bribes to watching eyes, payments to informants, whatever it took to seal the harbor tight. Meanwhile, Raina sat in darkness. They'd moved her to what felt like a storage container. Steel walls, musty air, the faint vibration of dock machinery in the distance. The hood was gone, but they'd zip-tied her to a metal chair bolted to the floor. She forced herself to breathe slowly, fighting down panic. The dress she wore was one of her new ones, carefully chosen that morning. Dark blue silk with delicate stitching at the hem. Now she worked at that stitching with careful fingers, searching for anything she could use as a tool. Hours crawled by. She mapped her prison by sound, heavy footsteps passing outside, the rumble of trucks, distant ship horns. Somewhere above, seagulls screamed. She was definitely near the water, probably in one of the industrial areas. At the estate, Calder transformed his office into a war room. A massive map covered one wall, dotted with markers showing possible locations. His intelligence network fed him constant updates, shipping manifests, security camera footage, dock worker gossip. 3 primary targets, he told his lieutenants, marking locations: the old fish processing plant, the container yard by Pier 12, and the warehouse complex on South Basin. We moved simultaneously on all 3. He studied the positions, calculating angles and risks. Every minute felt like acid in his veins, but he forced himself to be methodical. One wrong move could get Raina killed. The afternoon light faded to evening. In her steel cell, Raina had worked a small length of thread loose from her hem. It wasn't much, but it was something. She kept her breathing steady, remembering Calder's quiet strength, his absolute focus when handling a crisis. She knew he would come. The question was whether he would arrive before Rinaldi showed up to gloat over his prize. She suspected the rival boss wouldn't be able to resist coming to see her himself. Men like that always wanted to monologue over their victories. At the estate, Calder's teams gathered. Each unit had their assignments, their timing, coordinated down to the second. At 8:05 p.m., he stood before the map one final time, committing every detail to memory. His fingers traced the routes they would take, the positions they would hold. "I'm coming now," he whispered to the empty room, his voice carrying all the weight of a vow. Across the harbor, his men moved into position, ready to execute a plan that would either save everything or cost him everything. The police would be useless. This was his territory, his rules. He would find her, and then he would dismantle everyone who had dared to touch what was his. But first he had to bring her home. The South Docks lay silent under a starless sky. At 1:10 a.m., Calder's network reported movement, shadows shifting between containers, a guard rotation that wasn't quite natural. He studied the thermal imaging feed, counting heartbeats and heat signatures. 4 inside, he murmured into his comm. 2 at the perimeter, package confirmed. His team moved like oil on water. The first sentry went down without a sound, a precise chokehold from behind. The second tried to radio. The transmission died in static as Hector's hands snapped the device and then the man's consciousness. Calder stalked forward, his movements fluid despite the carbon brace. The cane made no sound on the concrete. Years of managing pain had taught him to move through it, to harness it into precision. Tonight, that control would mean everything. The security cameras looped their empty feeds. Floodlights died in careful sequence. His men ghosted through the gaps, securing exits and sightlines until the target building stood in artificial isolation. Inside the storage unit, Reyna tensed at the sudden quiet. Her captors had grown increasingly agitated over the past hour, checking phones that showed no signal, radioing guards who didn't respond. She'd worked the dress pin loose hours ago, holding it ready against her palm. An alarm chirped, soft, but enough to send one of the men lurching for a tablet. "Perimeter breached," he snarled. "Move her, now!" Rough hands dragged her up. The leader, she'd mentally named him Knife for his obvious favorite toy, pressed cold steel against her throat. "One sound, and this gets messy." They muscled her toward a side door. A single bulb swung overhead, casting wild shadows. And there, stepping into that pool of sickly light, stood Calder. He moved with terrible grace, each step measured. The cane clicked once against concrete before he let it fall. "Take me instead," he said, voice winter cold but steady. My throat for hers. Reyna felt Knife's grip tighten, saw the blade press closer, but that moment of focus on Calder was all she needed. She drove the dress pin deep into her captor's wrist, twisting as she dropped. Calder erupted into motion. The first man died before his gun cleared leather, a precise strike to the throat, a twist that ended in a snap. The second managed half a step before Calder's elbow crushed his windpipe. Knife, still reeling from Reyna's attack, lasted 3 seconds under that surgical violence before going limp beneath Calder's forearm. "Are you hurt?" Calder asked, voice gentle now as he helped her up. His hands moved carefully over her arms, checking for injuries. "Just bruised," she managed. "You came. Always." He shrugged out of his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. The fabric carried his warmth, smelled of cedar and gunpowder. Getting to the SUV tested his limits. The leg brace creaked with each step, and she could feel the tremors he fought to control. Still, he wouldn't let anyone else carry her. Hector drove, while Calder held her close in the back seat, his body between her and the windows. His men swept the route ahead, ensuring a clean path back to the estate. Dr. Morell waited for them at 3 a.m., medical bag ready. He checked Reyna first, bruised wrists from the zip ties, scraped knees from the concrete, but nothing broken. Calder submitted to examination only after Reyna was cleared, grimacing as Morell manipulated his leg. "Torn muscle fiber," the doctor confirmed. "Ice, compression, and actual rest this time." They moved to the inner suite, the most defensible room in the house. Guards took position at the corridor's end, close enough to respond but far enough to give privacy. Calder insisted on checking the windows and locks himself before allowing Reyna to settle. "Sleep," he told her softly. "I'll watch." She sank into the bed, exhaustion finally claiming her as adrenaline ebbed. Calder lowered himself into the chair beside her, leg propped carefully, gun within easy reach. Through the night, he maintained his vigil. Each time she stirred, his hand would find hers, a gentle squeeze promising safety. The door stayed ajar, an escape route, a sight line, a compromise between security and claustrophobia. Dawn crept in slowly, painting the room in pale gold. At 8:40 a.m., Reyna woke to find sunlight streaming across the bed. Calder had finally succumbed to sleep in the chair, his usual intensity smoothed away. For the first time since she'd met him, his jaw wasn't clenched against pain or calculation. She studied him in that unguarded moment, the scars that marked his throat, the strong hands now relaxed in sleep, the slight furrow between his brows that even rest couldn't fully erase. He'd come for her without hesitation, offered his life for hers without calculation. The morning light caught his wedding ring, the same simple band he'd given her that first night. What had started as a contract, a business arrangement, had become something else entirely. Something that made him walk into traps and her drive pins into wrists. Something that had them both choosing each other when the world turned dark. The armored SUV crawled up the crumbling driveway at 11:30 a.m., gravel crunching under its reinforced tires. Through bullet-resistant glass, Raina studied the dilapidated manse where her mother had taken refuge with Thomas Rinaldi. Ivy choked the stonework, and broken shutters hung at crooked angles. "Stay with Dr. Morell," Calder said, checking his weapon. "First sign of trouble." "The car goes straight to the fallback point," she finished. "I know." His hand found hers, squeezed once. The touch was brief but grounding, like everything between them now. "Hector, Miguel, west entrance," he ordered through his earpiece. "Anton and Cruz take the east. I want this contained, clean, and quick." Dr. Morell sat beside Raina in the back seat, medical bag ready. "Your husband moves like a man who's done this before," he observed quietly. "He has." Raina watched Calder signal his team. "But this time he's choosing restraint because I asked." At 12:05 p.m., they breached the house. Raina counted her heartbeats, fingers pressed to the window. The manse stood silent for 20 endless minutes. Then the front door burst open. Two of Calder's men emerged first, hauling Thomas Rinaldi between them. His expensive suit was torn, his face bloodied, though Raina suspected that was from trying to resist rather than unnecessary force. Behind them came Evelyn, unharmed but pale, escorted by Anton. Calder brought up the rear, leg brace visible beneath his slacks as he navigated the broken steps. His cane tapped a steady rhythm on the stone. They regrouped at a secure location, an abandoned warehouse Calder's people had swept clean. At 1 p.m., under harsh fluorescent lights, Raina faced her mother across a metal table. "Why?" The question fell like a stone between them. "Why label me broken? Why sell me as bait?" Evelyn's perfectly manicured hands twisted together. "You don't understand how the world works," she said. "No man of substance would choose you as a real wife. The infertility story, it was protection, to make you accept whatever came." "Protection?" Raina's voice cracked. "You wanted me compliant, grateful for scraps." "I needed security," Thomas offered. "You took money to help trap my husband." The words tasted like ash. "Your own daughter." A sudden movement drew their attention. Thomas had lurched forward, despite his restraints. Calder's gun appeared instantly, aimed with deadly precision. Raina stepped between them, one hand raised toward Calder. "Lower it," she said firmly, "please." Their eyes met. She saw the storm in his, the instinct to eliminate threats permanently. But she also saw trust, in her judgment, in her right to choose this ending. Slowly, the gun lowered. "I want them charged properly," Raina declared. "Fraud, conspiracy, everything that will stick in court. Let the law handle this." Calder nodded once, sharp and decisive. "It will be done." They left Evelyn and Thomas in custody, evidence already moving through careful channels. Back at the estate, Raina found herself on the terrace as evening approached. The ocean stretched endless below the cliffs, whitecaps catching the dying light. She heard Calder's familiar step behind her at 6:15 p.m. His cane clicked against the stone as he approached the table where she sat. Without a word, he placed his gun down, a gesture of peace, of choosing her way over violence. "Tell me what our world looks like now," he said quietly. Raina watched the sun paint the waves in gold and crimson. "Open gates," she answered. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and coming night, washing away the acrid memory of fluorescent lights and confrontation. Here, with the day's shadows lengthening across the terrace, she could begin to imagine a future built on choice rather than survival. Dr. Morell had left detailed notes absolving her of any infertility, proof that would help build the case against her mother and Dr. Voss. The evidence of conspiracy was damning. Banks, transfers, altered medical records, communications with Rinaldi's organization that traced back months. Throughout the day, Calder had worked tirelessly, using his influence to ensure the charges would stick. He'd called in favors, applied pressure, and done it all within the bounds of law because she had asked. A man who commanded fear had chosen to wield justice instead, reshaping his power to match her ethics without diminishing its force. The terrace offered a view of the entire estate, the gardens where they'd walked at dawn, the security gates that had once felt like barriers and now stood as shields, the private beaches where they might someday walk freely. From here she could see how protection didn't have to mean imprisonment, how strength could support rather than constrain. Calder remained beside her, a steady presence as the sun sank toward the horizon. He didn't press for more words, didn't demand she process faster than she could manage. Like everything between them now, he let her set the pace while ensuring she knew she wasn't alone. The sky blazed orange, then purple, nature's own display of power and beauty combined. Below, waves continued their eternal rhythm against the cliffs, a reminder that some forces reshape the world gradually, persistently, one patient stroke at a time. The gates swung wide in the pearly dawn light, their iron framework no longer a barrier, but a choice. Raina stood at the threshold, feeling the weight of the keys and access codes Calder had pressed into her palm at exactly 8 a.m. He remained a few steps behind her, leaning on his cane, watching as she stepped through. The guards had pulled back to the perimeter, nearly invisible among the trees and security posts. The driveway stretched ahead, damp with morning dew and possibility. Raina walked slowly, testing each step of her solitary journey. The gravel crunched beneath her shoes, a sound that had once meant confinement but now whispered freedom. At the bottom of the drive, she paused, looking back at the estate that had transformed from a gilded cage to something like home. Then she chose to return, each step deliberate and unhurried. Calder's face remained carefully neutral, but his eyes held a warmth that spoke volumes as she rejoined him. "Thank you," she said simply. He nodded, understanding all she didn't say. Dr. Morell arrived at 10 a.m., his leather briefcase containing the truth they'd fought to uncover. In Calder's study, he laid out the finalized medical results with clinical precision. "The previous reports were definitively falsified," Morell explained, spreading the documents across the desk. "Your reproductive health is completely normal, Mrs. Viscari, though as with anyone, there are never guarantees about the future." Raina's hands trembled as she read through the papers. Relief flooded through her first, the liberation of knowing her body hadn't betrayed her. Then came the grief, sharp and sudden, for all the years she'd carried that false burden, all the choices made under its weight. Calder moved closer, one hand settling warm and steady on her shoulder. He didn't offer empty words or try to rush her through the complex emotions. He simply held her, his presence an anchor until she was ready to speak. "I want these filed somewhere safe," she finally said, "and copies sent to the prosecutor." "Already arranged," Calder assured her. The afternoon brought another milestone when Theo arrived at 3 p.m. He practically ran to Raina, wrapping her in a fierce hug that spoke of weeks of worry. When they pulled apart, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "You look good, sis," he said, studying her face. "Happy, even?" "I am," she replied honestly. Theo turned to Calder then, giving him the kind of analytical once-over that only protective younger brothers could manage. Calder met his gaze steadily. "Your sister's safety is my highest priority," Calder said quietly, "and that extends to you. No one will ever come near either of you again." Something in his tone, the absolute certainty perhaps, or the underlying steel, seemed to satisfy Theo. He nodded once, tension easing from his shoulders. They spent the afternoon showing Theo the estate, the library that had become Raina's favorite retreat, the kitchen where Isabel was already preparing his preferred foods, information Calder had somehow acquired, the gardens with their ocean view. Watching her brother relax into the space, Raina felt another piece of her world slide into place. Evening arrived warm and gentle, the sky painted in watercolor hues. At 7:45 p.m., Calder led Raina to the terrace overlooking the sea. The air was sweet with night-blooming jasmine from the gardens below. Without warning, Calder set aside his cane and lowered himself to one knee. His hands, when he reached for hers, trembled slightly. Not from fear or pain, but from something deeper, more reverent. "The first time we signed papers," he said softly. "Let me do this right now." The ring he offered caught the last light of day, but Raina barely saw it. She was caught instead by the look in his eyes, the man who commanded fear with a whisper, now laid bare with wonder. "This isn't about possession or bargains," he continued. "This is partnership, protection freely given and received, choice." He drew a breath. "Will you marry me again, Raina? This time with no contracts, no pressure, just us." "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes!" The ring slipped onto her finger like it had always belonged there. Later, at 11:10 p.m., they swayed together in the quiet house. The security monitors had been dimmed to a soft glow, watching over peace rather than imprisonment. Their bare feet moved in perfect rhythm across the floor, her head resting naturally on his shoulder. Calder's arms tightened slightly around her waist as he whispered, "You're mine. and I am yours, forever." The words settled into Raina's heart like truth, like coming home. The man who had first appeared as a quiet stranger with a cane had become her shelter, her strength, her choice. He remained lethal to their enemies, ruthless in protecting what was his. But to her, only to her, he showed endless tenderness. The night wrapped around them like silk, the ocean's endless song drifting through open windows. Somewhere beyond the walls, guards kept their watch, but here in this moment, there was only the gentle sway of their bodies, the shared rhythm of their breath, and the promise of all their tomorrows stretching out before them, chosen, cherished, and free.